Okay, so some things I kind of glossed over from Chapter 2 that I get kind of excited sometimes and skip things that aren't as exciting as others. So a couple things that we want to add in before we close out Chapter 2 is in Chapter 1 we introduced the 5-component framework, right? We talked about every information system can be broken into their 5 components: hardware, software, data, procedures, and people. And if we look at collaboration information systems through that lens, some of the things are pretty intuitive. Some things we know. Hardware and collaboration information systems are things like the servers, the cloud, your mobile device, anything, your webcam, your microphone, all those kind of things come into play with hardware for collaboration information systems. The real exciting things in collaboration information systems tend to be the software, right? The newest ways we can communicate with one another, whatever that might be. We're talking about email software, text messaging software, Google Drive, which I showed you, Microsoft Web Apps, maybe SharePoint, software, Google Hangouts, all these things, Skype, all these are examples of software that can be used for collaboration. Procedures, it depends with what the software is. The best kind of collaboration information system are the ones that you really don't have to do much training with, right? No one trained you how to text. You didn't have to do a training class like Texting 101. So collaboration information system, communication is a natural human thing. So ones that remove the barriers and make it easy to collaborate are the best. People know when to use collaboration applications. We're going to talk about that in a minute. The one thing I kind of wanted to focus on is the data. Okay, what is the data when we talk about collaboration information systems? There's really 2 types of data. What is the data in collaboration information systems? For example, what is the data we are collaborating on in Google Drive? What is the data we're collaborating on in Google Drive? Anyone? Chapter 1 notes, Schwab plans, the SAM flash forward. That is what we call like project data, right? It is the main content, the thing we are collaborating on, right? That's called project data or content data, right? That's the thing we're sharing. We're working on this spreadsheet together. But there's another type of data that collaboration information systems capture called metadata. Okay, metadata is a good term. What is metadata? What is meta? What is metadata? Does anyone know what meta prefix means? Maybe that would help. What is metadata? Have you ever heard the term metadata? The prefix meta? Any word that starts with meta? No? Metadata is kind of a weird definition. Is data about data. Okay? Like data about data. So if we look at our collaboration, what is data about data? If we look at our collaboration exercise, what would the metadata? So you're right, Steve. The content data is definitely the outline, the pictures I put up in Schwab plans. What's the metadata? Okay, so the metadata is everything that goes around it, right? So the revision history. Think about that. That Steve updated it on August 31st. That's not really content data. That's data about the content, right? That's data about the data. But it's important, right? Because I can see now, hey, this is when Steve updated. This is what he updated, right? It's not the content, but it's important data to capture. The comments themselves, I would say the comments themselves would actually be part of the project data, right? Because that is data that we are collaborating on. That's part of the content. Could be part of the content. I guess some of it, like when the comments were, by who, that's kind of the metadata. But the content of those messages is probably project data. So good collaboration information systems don't just capture the content, but they capture the data about the content, like who updated it, when they updated it, what it looks like with this filter. So that's really the thing I wanted to cover there, what metadata is. Okay? Metadata is data about data. All right? So the last thing, and we kind of started this, well, there's 2 things. The last thing that we left off on is alternatives for sharing content. And I've kind of hit home on this, that there are different layers or different ways to share content. And one of the things we talk about is content control. And emails with attachments, putting things on a shared network drive, no control, right? We said, you do that, now you have 20 different versions of the same document. It's on a network, people can update it, they can overwrite each other, no good. We talked about version management, that was Google Drive, okay? And the book, and I'm not sure this is a necessary delineation, but they talk about a higher level, something called, beyond version management, something called version control. And I just want to the book puts some things under version control that I want to talk about that can be very, very useful. Okay, they talk about, 4 different things that highest level of version management has, or version control. And the first one is user activity limited by permission. Okay, so Google Drive kind of has that, right? I chose who I can share documents with. I chose what you could do with it. I said you can edit it or you can read it, right? That is user activity permissions. When we do something like this, there's always 2 necessary components. And the first one goes by 2 ways. The first one is authentication. What is authentication? What is authentication? What is authentication when we talk about information systems? How do you authenticate to Google? Maybe that's a good question. How do you authenticate to your phone? How do you authenticate to your email? What's the authentication process you go through? Very good. Authentication is anything that's done for you to prove you are who you say you are, right? 9 times out of 10, authentication is exactly what Steve said, your username and your password. I know it's you because only Malik knows his user ID and his password, hopefully only Malik. What are other ways systems do authentication? What are other ways systems do authentication? Mr. King?
They just do the fingerprint.
Okay. The fingerprint, retinal scanning, facial recognition, what those are all called are biometric authentication, right? Because, biomarkers, you're looking for biomarkers, your fingerprint, retinal scan, things that make you unique. And what's great about those is what? Versus a password.
Nobody can duplicate.
Right, it's not easy, and you always have it with you, right? You're always going to have your fingerprint, you always have your face, right? So all those things are a nice thing. So for us to do user activity permissions, the first step is we have to authenticate. We have to be able to uniquely authenticate that this person is who they say they are. The second thing is authorization. Authorization is, if we know who you are, right, now we can give you various permissions, okay? Authorization is what you are authorized to do. You're not allowed to see this document at all. You're allowed to open this document, but read it only. You're allowed to edit this document. You're allowed to share this document. We can assign various permissions to you, right? But we first have to say, this is John Miko. That's authentication. And then we say, these are the things he can and can't do with each of these documents. So when you share something, right, to Mr. Myers, you're doing that. You're saying he can read this, or he can edit it, or he cannot, right? I'm not sharing it with him, so the default is not. And I don't know if you noticed when you share it, you can say, share it with everyone at johnmiko.com, right? So anyone in our organization of johnmiko.com can read the document. So that is a feature, a version control feature that you find in Google Drive and you find in some of the higher level shared content systems. Document checkout, I think I mentioned this earlier. Document checkout is the ability to check out a document virtually and say, hey, I'm editing this right now. No one else can edit it. You can read it, but I'm editing it right now. I've checked it out. Just like you check a book out of the library and say, this is mine right now. I'm editing it or I'm reading it. Okay? You can say it's mine for a period of time. Usually the system lets you have it for 3 days, 5 days, 7 days, then it goes back into the repository. So that's a feature. Version history, something we saw as well in Google Drive than we saw today. The beautiful thing about that is I just don't have the latest version of the document. You know, if it's truly collaborative, we have multiple iterations, and we can see how it was built upon it. And if someone did something we don't like, right? Someone added a section or deleted a section, we can easily go back and restore to a previous version. So version history is a very nice tool. And the last one I talked about a little bit when we talked about like the drop add process, but workflow control or queuing, and it's sometimes called queuing, is really, you know, kind of a separating feature of collaboration information systems. Google Drive really doesn't have it. Okay, you could probably build it in there. You could probably put in your document. I'm going to share this with 6 or 7 people, and John Miko, after you reviewed it, check this box, and maybe Eric, after you reviewed it, check this box, right? But systems like SharePoint, they actually have a workflow control, right? So maybe think about the Schwab project. The architect might say, here are our plans. We need both the physical plan to review it, make sure it meets any standard St. Francis has. We need Dr. Fry to approve it. Maybe we need Father Malachi to approve it. You know, those documents that say, okay, once the physical plant approves it, then it goes to Dr. Fry for his approval, and then it goes back to the architect saying, hey, everything was blessed off, right? So you can actually program like the path of the document. And I think I used the drop add or the withdrawal slip as an example of that, right? If you do that online, you say, hey, I want to drop this class, that causes a workflow to be kicked off. If you're an athlete, that's conditional. It goes to John Krimmel. Once John Krimmel signs off on it, it goes to your advisor. Once your advisor signs off on it, it goes to the professor, and then it automatically happens in the system instead of you doing sneakernet all around the campus. Okay? So workflow control. Now that's basically all I wanted to cover in the slides. But one of the things that I've said a million times is we've talked about content locally and content in the cloud. But we really haven't kind of delineated the strengths and weaknesses to both of those. And I want to take some time and do that. So we have an option. Every time we create content, we can store it on our hard drive, we can store it on a thumb drive, or we can store it in the cloud. What are the strengths and weaknesses to both of those methods? You know, the cloud is, right, Mr. Connors? What's an advantage of storing something in the cloud versus on your hard drive? Okay, so very good. If you think about it, there's a lot of services. I mean, it's the cloud, right? It's really kind of infinite, yes? So storage capacity, and you even heard Miss Ross say, hey, I ran out of phone on my space, but I'm not worried about Google running out of. I ran out of space on my phone, but I'm not worried about Google running out of space, right? So storage capacity is a plus here, right? Storage capacity is a plus here. What else? What else? What's that?
You don't need a computer, you can do it anywhere with your phone.
Okay, so if you think about it, accessibility is a plus here. Okay? Now, it also can be a negative as well. Why a negative? You're right, accessibility is you can be anywhere. You can be in Afghanistan, you can be in Christian Hall, you can be in Blitzen. It doesn't matter where you're at. It doesn't matter what device it is. It doesn't matter where you're at. You can be accessible. But what's the one thing that kind of is the drawback with accessibility? Okay, well that's a negative, right? So security can be problematic because you can access it everywhere. But I'm thinking about accessibility. What is the thing that it relies upon that you may not be able to get in Afghanistan or maybe Chelsea? Yeah, you need the internet, right? You think about it. Now, not all things. They have sync features, right? So it can sync to your device and the cloud so that if you're not accessing the cloud, you can access the local copy, and then whenever you get the internet back, it syncs back up. But accessibility is sometimes some of these things are relying upon having access to a network or the internet. Very good. So Ms. Ross kind of said security with the cloud is an issue. And it can be because if you think about it, if someone can emulate, if it's in the cloud, you know, your phone is in your pocket, right? And it's kind of like you have physical security of that, right? If it's in my pocket, you know, and the document is in my pocket, well, it's kind of physical security. But if it's in the cloud, if anyone can authenticate as you, you know, they know your user ID and password, well, they can access that document as well, right? They can be you. That's why keeping a good password is, you know, when you're storing things in the cloud, your user ID and password, very important. Okay, very much more important than you're keeping things locally, right? Much more important. Good, good. What else? What else? What else? That's it. So someone mentioned storage capacity. So capacity is important. Something goes along with capacity is scalability. What does scalability mean? What is scalability? It's a good computer term, it's a good term, period. But what does scalability mean?
You can like size it.
You can size it up or down, right? If you think about it, your phone might be a 16 gigabyte phone, right? Maybe it has an SD card and you can size it up that way. But a lot of the new ones don't have that. So if you want a 32 gigabyte phone, what do you have to do? Yeah. Well, you have to buy a new phone, right? So it's not real easily scalable. If you want a 128 gigabyte phone, but if you think about it, these kind of things, if we're using Google Drive, I think I told you I pay $2 a month for 100 gigabytes. If I want a terabyte, all I do is say, hey, I'll pay $4 a month. Boom, now I have a terabyte, right? Scalability is the ability to change capacity easily, right? Very scalable when we're on the cloud. You know, very scalable. You shared that document with, I don't know, 20 people. You could have just as easily shared that document with 1,000 people, right? Very, very scalable kind of solutions. What else? What else? What else? Some mobility, accessibility, security. What else? Come on. Nothing else?
Sharing.
Okay. So when we talk about that, you know, the sharing, we can share locally, kind of, right? We can share locally, kind of. When we say sharing in the cloud, what are some advantages? Well, a lot of the things we mentioned there, right? We can have versions, you know, we can have different permissions, you know, we can do workflow control. So sharing is a much better thing. And if we think about it, you know, we can do what's called crowdsourcing, and that's kind of what we're doing with our notes. What is crowdsourcing? What is crowdsourcing? Crowdsourcing is giving a task that you would normally do yourself to the crowd. You know, not to one person, not to Mark, you know, not to Sarah, but to the crowd of people. Okay, that's called crowdsourcing. So that's an advantage of the cloud. What else? What are some other things that we can see here? What are some other things that we have with the cloud?
This is like a negative thing, but
Yeah, it could be a negative as well.
No, I guess it's positive now I think about it. But if your like phone crashes or your computer crashes or something, it's all stored there. So that's
Okay.
how to
Very
it's
good.
a, like backup, I guess.
Very good. Backup. Okay? That's a plus, right? Am I worried? I think I said this. Am I worried that Google engineers aren't doing backups? Am I worried about my data on Google? Those pictures that I have stored on Google, those precious moments like that hawk picture, am I worried about that? No, I'm not worried about it, right? If it's stored on my computer and my computer gets, you know, in a fire or something like that, I am worried about that, right? I know it's gone. So backup. So those kind of things are very, very good. So what I want you to think about is, you know, in the business world, I know you guys do collaborative work now. Maybe not as often as you will do in the business world. But when you think about it, when you do collaboration, you know, try to use the kind of tools that you're going to use in the business world. You know, like start using Google Drive. Start looking at those kinds of things for collaboration instead of sending out emails, right? Email is old, right? A lot of organizations use like things like SharePoint. They don't rely upon email. They rely upon emails for quick communications back and forth. Use the tools that you're going to use in the business world. So that's all I have for chapter 2. There's some other things in here. What's going to happen in the future? A lot of the things that can happen in the future now, face-to-face meetings will be rare. Employees work at home full-time or part-time. Corporate training is online and asynchronous, much less business travel. This is all the results of these kinds of things. Conventions become virtual. Travel focused on industrial, recreational travel, not business travel. Collaboration systems are cheaper, easier to use, run on portable devices. Moore's Law driving all those things down. All right, I'm going to stop there. Look for your email today for a recorded lecture starting on Chapter 3. Chapter 3 is using information systems for competitive advantage. Next week, big assessment week. We have our test. Exam 1 is on Friday. Wednesday, your Chapter 2 quiz is due. And I think this Friday at midnight I have the Google Docs assignment due, right? Okay. So a lot of stuff going on. Have a great week and weekend.